Hi there, sweet mommies. This is Sherry Hayes with MomDelights.com. I'm the mom of 15 and I've been homeschooling for over 3 decades, and I'd like to share something with you that will not distract you and not take you away from your primary calling, but I would like to share something that will add to your life. So go ahead and wash the dishes and mow the lawn. No, I'm kidding. Whatever you need to do while we dig into the good life in Jesus. Okay, so today we are going to continue our unit study for mommies, and we're doing a unit study on babies, and it's important. I mean, if you're homeschooling, you're probably dealing with babies or people that used to be babies not too long ago. Okay, now I have given birth to 15 lively children, and they were all one at a time. Okay, in medical terms, I am a great-grand multipara. Okay, I suppose you could say that I'm an expert in my field. With this in mind, today I would like to tell you something about respecting childbirth. Now, that's a little play on words. This is respecting or regarding childbirth. But anyway, let's go on. Now, what have I personally learned about childbirth? I mean, I've done it 15 times, so I have gained a little bit of knowledge. But remember, this is very subjective. Most of it is. A lot of it is objective, but I'm going to show you more subjective stuff today. I hope you don't mind. Okay. First of all, I have learned that childbirth is a life-giving process. I know it sounds really obvious, but it is life-giving in more ways than one. Okay, this process gives life to the child, life to the mother, and life to all those connected and included. The birth of a child is something amazing and monumental. It is the birthing of an eternal soul into the world. It is the welcoming of a person recently in the presence of God. That's what I truly believe. And my husband and I often speculate that when our newborn babies who do not have the ability to smile spontaneously, but they'll like smile in their sleep, my husband always says that it's because they remember looking at God and seeing angels. Okay. The next life-giving, amazing thing about childbirth and pregnancy is that its essence is intensely intimate, right? Yes, there are outward joys to be shared, but what happens inside the heart and soul of a mother carrying a baby is indescribable. This actually became more intense with me the more children I had. Instead of it being like ho-hum, whatever, it actually became more intensely intimate for me. I found that I did not share my last pregnancies with too many people, right? They were too delicately precious to me to be exposed for the world to gape upon. Okay, I was profoundly aware. After all those pregnancies, I was profoundly aware, even just to a greater extent, that I was bringing something eternal into the temporal. And I wanted to enjoy its majesty without the shallow comments of onlookers. I discovered just there's this deepness of pregnancy and childbirth. And when people go, oh, so you're going to have 15, tell me boys, blah, blah, blah. And I don't mind that, honestly, but just like, I just wanted to envelop myself with that sweetness, that peace that came with it. Okay. Now, finally, regarding childbirth, we need to respect the process and not fight it. Okay. With pregnancy comes a softening, both of body and soul. It happens to women all the time. Instead of fighting this softening, let's cooperate with it and yield, and we will yield great benefits for everyone concerned. Okay. Now, of course, pregnancy is different for every woman. All right. Some sail through it. I mean, they don't even feel sick, right? But some of us, we suffer greatly, some more than others. Now, morning sickness threw me to my knees in more ways than one. Okay, I had to have Jesus carry me. I had to keep all of my emotions on a surface level. I couldn't go very deep with my emotional self Not at all. Okay. At times I was almost unable to pray, right? Except for a constant saying his name. Jesus, 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 because I didn't have any other strength left. I think you can relate, lots of you. At times, he had to carry me because I had no strength and nothing to bring to him. You know, there's that Rock of Ages, the hymn that says, made by Augustus M. Toplady. And it says in one of the verses, nothing in my hand I bring, simply to thy cross I cling. Naked, come to thee for dress. Helpless, look to thee for grace. Foul, I to the fountain fly. Wash me, Savior, or I die. You know, I had to run on batteries during those times. Now, that meant that when I was feeling good, then I was in the Word and I was praying and I was doing all those amazing things so that I was built up for the times that I went through, times when it was just like I was just barely making it through the day. All right, so it's important. Sometimes when we feel good, we just moving on. We don't have time for that devotion. We don't have time for that. We're moving on. And then something hits us and then we're, whoa, we haven't planted enough seeds to have a harvest in the times when we really need to be fed. So it's really important when you're feeling good, you know, spend time doing all those important things. And then when you can't do those things, then you're going to reap the fruit of those seeds that were planted when you were feeling good. Anyway, even my nutrition when I was first pregnant was on batteries for the first few months. After that, I could concentrate more on nutrition. But for the first few months, it was just whatever I could tolerate and get in there. And sometimes it was junk food. Just sorry, that's the truth. Okay, now I always tried to keep away from anything that could harm my baby, including caffeine, alcohol, over-the-counter drugs, etc. I tried to exercise and I tried to drink water. I tried to do everything right. And educating myself about the process also proved quite helpful. Okay, one of the first books I read on the subject was by Dr. Bradley, okay? And his ideas have since become the Bradley Method. Now, I read a book by him, the first book he wrote, and I read that in 1982 is when I read this book. I know I'm old, okay? I read this book and that really helped me. Another book that helped me was Ina May Gaskin's book, Spiritual Midwifery. Now, this has some Eastern mysticism in it, so you have to do it with a grain of salt, right, with some discernment. But it has so much interesting stuff about midwifery and the birth process and all these different things. I mean, it really opens your eyes. So Dr. Bradley and Ina May Gaskin were both helpful to me to understand how everything worked. Now, as I was armed with knowledge, I could converse intelligently with healthcare professionals. I could understand their jargon a little bit, and I could ask them questions that were intelligent, right? And I could also make better choices that way. Now, understanding birth also removed any fears I may have had due to lack of knowledge. I don't know what's going on. So, it's been proven that if you're afraid, you tense and you increase your pain level when you're afraid. So anything you can do to keep you from being afraid when you're giving birth is going to help you not experience as much pain, which is great. Okay. In other words, knowing about birth put me in the driver's seat. Okay. And some doctors didn't like that. I also paid attention to my baby and my body. I found out how I work. Not necessarily about on average how everybody else works, but how does my body work? How does my body respond to different things, okay? Now, this is serious work, this pregnancy thing, but it is a natural work. This is not a sickness or an illness, okay? Women were successfully birthing long before we had ultrasounds and heart monitors and IVs, right? Now, of course, these are all amazing things to have if you have an emergency situation, because we also live in a fallen world and things get broken, right? And so your body can be messed up, okay? So we need these things. These are really wonderful life-saving tools that have kept us from seeing babies die and mommies die as much as they used to. But you still can't see pregnancy and childbirth as a disease because it's not. Those things should be brought in when necessary, but not as a general, that's our common practice. We just put the IV, we do the things just because that's what we do. Now, I recently heard an account of a Holocaust survivor whose mother gave birth to her in a coal cart on the way to a prison camp. She weighed only 3 pounds at birth, but her mother kept this little tiny infant alive by holding her close to her own emaciated body. Now, this baby lived into her 90s, okay? So, interesting. Just saying, you hear these good stories all the time, don't you? I mean, it's sad, but I mean, it's good, right? Okay, I think it's important to remember that childbirth is different for everyone. Each person has a different threshold for pain, a different shaped body, etc. This is why there should never, never, never be any judgment for women who have given birth in whatever, however it happened, right? Some have no choice but to rely on medical interventions such as C-sections, and they should never receive any judgment or think of themselves as being any less of a good mommy because things happen and they're out of our control, right? Now, and having said that, I know people who have had 9 C-sections, okay? I know people who've had to have all the interventions possible in order to save their babies. There's nothing wrong with that, all right? Now, for me, though, natural childbirth was the best thing. After I read Dr. Bradley's book, I could not imagine it any other way, but the folks at the Army hospitals where I delivered my first 2 babies didn't see things my way. As soon as they were sure I was in labor, they put my legs up in those stirrups, and my babies came out with their fists on their heads, and so, I had 3rd and 4th degree tears. And that was really hard because, when you're in the stirrups, it's just not good. However, my subsequent pregnancies, they turned out just fine because I was able to be in a position where I wasn't forcing that baby uphill, right? So anyway, that's just one example of different things that they used to do as common practice that they found are unnecessary. Okay. Now, I have never had any pain medication. I've never had an epidural or anything like that. One time they gave me some Stadol, and I guess it's a relaxant, but all it did was make me feel helpless, but I was still in just as much pain. I don't know why I was such a wimp. But anyway, they gave me Stadol, but that's the only time I ever had medication when I was giving birth. And now that doesn't mean I was never induced. I was induced a number of times, okay? So but eventually I gained a realization of just how powerful childbirth could be, okay? And I relished in it, all right? At one birth, it was in a freestanding birth center, and I was attended by an RN midwife, okay? And I just squatted on the bed, and as the baby emerged from my body, the midwife guided her up into my own arms. So I birthed my baby into my own arms. Can you imagine? And the umbilical cord was still attached. The placenta hadn't been delivered. And I was able to wipe her off and wrap her in a blanket. And she just stared into my eyes. For the longest time, we just stared into each other's eyes. That was so powerful. It was so neat. So neat. And I love to give birth on all fours. That's my favorite way to do it. And you can learn all about that stuff. It's a lot of fun. Anyway. Now, but if you can't enjoy the ultimate childbirth experience, how we want to have these experiences in life, in the end, it doesn't mean anything. All that counts is that tiny person is in your arms, that you can love that person even if they aren't 100% healthy. It doesn't matter. What matters is you have been complying with God and his wonderful plans for his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. And whatever comes your way, you can experience his grace to help you do it. And it still is this wonderful, beautiful experience. All right. Let's say experience like 10 times. Anyway, I do know that recovery is much quicker when you go as natural as you possibly can, right? One of our daughters just gave birth in a freestanding birth center. Her first had been in an Army hospital with all sorts of the regular interventions, Now, the recovery took longer, and it wasn't very pleasant. The second one was with midwives, and they respected the process of childbirth, and they offered her natural medicine alternatives to everything, okay? She was released 6 hours after she gave birth, and her placental wound healed within 2 weeks. Okay, it was just amazing. It was a totally night and day difference. And her husband goes, man, we can have lots of babies if it's this easy. He actually almost enjoyed the experience himself. Okay, now what about baby spacing? This is something that I receive this question quite often. Okay, my own grandmother learned to be a nurse in an age where everyone was looking to the savage to find how things were, quote, supposed to be, unquote. This is like in the 1920s, okay? And supposedly there was this tribe someplace in I think in the Congo or something like that, where these native peoples had spaced their children 5 years apart. And they'd studied it and they said, yes, they wrote papers about it and they all talked about it. Yes, 5 years, that is the exact amount of years that's optimum for everybody to be smart and all this kind of stuff, right? So, never mind that there's the same tribes in the same area. Like if their children receive their top teeth first instead of their bottom, they would expose them and let them die because they were wicked and all kinds. We don't want to fall. Forget it. Anyway, there is no such thing as optimal spacing between children. Okay, this is God's work after all, right? His thoughts and his reasons are much higher than mine, so I let him decide, and I leave the rest to his grace. All right, I do find that having children close together is hardest at first, but later turns out swimmingly, as the children entertain and support each other, right? Even the grown children in our house, they're getting along quite well. They hang together, they watch movies together, they go to the store together, they go on hikes together, they plan trips together. Now they have friends, they have close friends that they do things with, but they even include their friends together. I mean, they're always doing something together. They prefer that. They sit around the breakfast table and they're talking, they play games, all this kind of stuff. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so it does help to have your kids spaced close together because they really do enjoy each other. But, if you have large gaps between your oldest and maybe the next child, that's okay. That'll work out too. I mean, it's God's business. He knows how to engineer families. This is his job, okay? I cooperate and I do the best with what he's given me. All right. The family God gives us, if we are open to his leading, is the perfect family composition. This may include a special needs child or twins or huge gaps of years. Remember, babies are not an ends. They are a means to perfecting all of us in holiness and bringing God's kingdom to earth as it is in heaven, as I said before. Okay. Also, it's not about the number of children you have. It's about the state of our souls, whether we are small-minded or big-hearted, which I've discussed in previous videos about how we can be small-minded, like the Israelites when they were spying out the promised land, and there were some of the 12 spies that went in. Most of them were like small-minded, like, oh no, what are we gonna do? Oh, we're scared, but there were two big-hearted spies, Joshua and Caleb. And Joshua and Caleb thought, God's big enough to handle this. Look, he brought us through all this other stuff. He killed the Egyptian army by drowning them after we went over on dry land. I mean, what can our God not do, right? And so if you have that attitude of what can my God not do with my body, with my life, with whatever, then you're open to anything he has for you, whether it's 1 child, 0 children, or 21 children. Okay, you're open to that because God is the originator and he is sovereign. Okay, as I've discussed in earlier posts, the health benefits of mothering are numerous. However, there will be some physical sacrifices we'll have to make. Our figures may bounce back or they may suffer. We might not be on Instagram, with a skinny workout suit and the dumbbells doing our exercises. Or we might be. I mean, you might be the exception to the rule, but most of us, we might look a little different. Okay. But while we should strive to be as healthy as possible, it's just general that we should also be willing to embrace looking motherly and not necessarily slim as models. Okay, now this doesn't mean we let our health go and develop bad habits and blame it all on having kids. Like, oh, why do you look that way? Well, it's the kids, they did it to me. We don't do that either. I mean, you got to make the best of everything you have. Self-discipline is always a good thing. That's one of the fruits of the Spirit is self-discipline, right? Okay, one thing I have observed. Having babies, lots of them, does not leave you infirmed later in life. I'm 60 now, and, I do have a few health challenges, but they really have nothing to do with giving birth to children. They're like stuff that I've had even before I started having children. Like my ankles are a little weak, so I have some issues there, and a few digestive issues, but they have nothing to do with having kids. My husband has the same digestive issues, so it's probably not childbirth. Now, I think we benefit from having children if we're open to whatever God has for us because, as A.W. Tozer has put it, God runs a beauty shop, okay? Walking closely with God in his love can only cause one to become more beautiful with age. And I've seen this over and over again, okay? Sadly, people base their opinions about multiparas, having more than a couple children, on information gathered from, sadly, I think a lot of the information we have on women who've had more than 2 children is based on studies they've done on women who lived in poverty and were like welfare recipients because they lived immoral lifestyles, and they went in there and they gathered all this information on how they lived and how their children turned out. And for the most part, they were fatherless. And they lived immoral lifestyles. They oftentimes were into drugs and alcohol. And so all these factors put together, and then they gathered all this information. They said, well, this is what happens in large families. Like the last child is this, and the first child is that, and they end up in this, and then, and that's not really fair to judge large families on that demographic. But, they do it all the time, right? Like they do the demographic where if you're over, my gynecologist actually told me this. Okay. The idea that women over a certain age have a greater propensity to deliver Down syndrome babies. He said that was not based on good information. He actually looked into this study. Now, he was a Catholic man, and he was very pro-life. And he said that is not necessarily true, that older women give birth to more Down syndrome babies than younger women. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So you have to be careful. We've got a lot of wrong information based on wrong studies done in wrong ways. It's kind of like those studies that say, well, we've discovered that people who eat butter when they're 2 years old, when they're 90, they will get skin cancer. Okay, how do you, all that living, how do you take it and make sure it's just the butter when they're 2 years old? Which, that's total exaggeration. But it's kind of like that. Like, how do you isolate this one little thing and then put it over here to skin cancer? Anyway, there's something. Or whatever, cancer or whatever thing. Okay, now, let's see. The wisdom I would share with other mothers is this. Allow mothering, including pregnancy and childbirth, to have its perfect work in you. Enjoy the softening and the warming of God's love and allow it to go beyond your own children to those around you, including the lost and hurting you come across wherever you go. Okay, become a healing balm and a safe haven. Allow mothering to make you a sweet bouquet of Jesus offered to the world. And sometimes that might be a steel magnolia. Anyway, you get the idea. Now here's something else. It's been so much fun visiting today, hasn't it? I hope you like the content here on my Mom Delights YouTube channel or any podcast you might be listening to this video on. Now, I have a website. It's momdelights.com, and on that website, I have a number of things that you can access that will bless your mom life, your homeschool life. I particularly wanted Mom Delights, the whole thing, to be a ministry to moms, to give moms access to tools that are affordable and excellent. So along that lines, I have published via Amazon, or KDP as they call it, a number of books, workbooks, whatever you want to call them, and also informational books for moms that I think might be very helpful to you. Okay, so first of all, the first thing I ever published on Amazon is this book. It's Homeschool Sanity, and it kind of outlines a lot of what, and this is done in 2012, okay? Now, I have evolved slightly since then, but it's basically the same stuff that I talk about all the time here on my channel and on my blog. So it's really affordable. I try to make everything affordable. It might help you if you're just beginning on your homeschool journey, or if you just need like a little different input, or, you know, a different direction. You could try this book. Now for some more books that I think you'll really like. This is my book that I wrote, a kind of a gist about how I organize my life, different thought patterns I have about rearing children and being a mom of many. This is called Glorious Mothering, and you can find this, and it's also affordable, and you can find this on Amazon.com. Now, for the rest of the books that I'm going to show you, I have free download versions. They're not necessarily the exact versions in the printed books, but there are versions of these books that you can download for free from my website, momdelights.com. And I have a freebie section, and I think you can find all of them there, I hope. And these will really help you. You can get these pre-printed, and that's always helpful too, isn't it? And I try to make them as affordable as I can to bless you. So let me show you the first one. These are the lesson book series. These follow generally the McGuffey Reader series that I promote for language arts. But they can also be used with all kinds of different books. You know, Dr. Seuss if you wanted to. And I have a blog post, and I've explained these, but they are so cool. I'll show you inside the first one. You can see these are books that the kids, they're kind of open-ended, but they give some structure, and they're so tremendously helpful. So these are something you could consider when thinking about language arts for your kids. Something else that is quite helpful that I found a lady, her name is C.C. Long, and she wrote some books way ago in the 1800s, and they were grammar books, but they were really gentle grammar. My kids, when they started to want to write sentences and paragraphs, they didn't even know what a sentence was. And so these books kind of take a child and kind of teach them. They're meant to loosely be applicable to the revised series of McGuffey Readers. They kind of go along that vein, but you don't have to use them that way. And I've paraphrased them, and I've changed them slightly to be more modern. And my children, they fill these out, and they did so well. And there's places for them. It's a consumable workbook, so they can go through it, but it only takes like 10 minutes a day. So these are really great if you want to teach your child just how to do a basic sentence or basic paragraph without getting into all the grammar jargon. I don't think they talk about nouns and verbs and stuff until maybe the fourth book. It's a series of 4, and I think in the fourth book they start talking about nouns and verbs, but before that they're just practicing making sentences and paragraphs that make sense. And they're free downloads, by the way. So these are good to enjoy too. Next, I have my Splendid Spelling. Now, this is a really fun thing. I did this entire book using the free stuff on Canva. And I based it on a book called An Acorn in My Hand, and some other things. And some other ideas I had from some old books and stuff. And what it does is it's not an exhaustive spelling book, but it gives a really good phonetic basis for spelling with some rules that are generally applied to English. You know, English is one of those squirmy things, right, when you come to spelling. But anyway, this gives a child a basic understanding so they can go from there and even spell better later on. And here are the results of my latest project. Now, these are multiple copies. There are actually 2 versions that I came out of the Commonplace books. And these books are meant to be places where kids can keep their notebooking pages. A mom wrote to me and she said, you know, I love doing notebooking with my kids, but there's just a whole bunch of loose papers hanging all over the place. Could you make like a workbook where you have the notebooking pages all neatly in one place so that they can just fill it out and I don't have to worry about keeping everything together? So this is the primary Commonplace notebook. And it just has places for kids to draw and to write on a primary level. See, there are dotted lines there. And then this one is the next one up from that. It's the Commonplace book number 2, and it has just straight lines. And I'm just about to put Commonplace book number 3 to press. And then after I've done that, then I'm going to do, this is the next project I'm working on. I think I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot about color and how things print out by doing these other ones. This is going to be the big book of homeschool lists. It's going to have instructions and ideas. It's going to be list after list after list of all kinds of cool stuff, like the Bible stories listed, scripture listed in order as you find them actually in the scripture, not a Bible story book, but where they're in the Bible. A list of famous people that are interesting to learn about, a list of events, a list, all kinds of lists, just list after list after list, basic list of world history, what should be covered on world history. There's going to be so many lists that you can just, use history. There's going to be so many lists you can just go through and just find what you need for your child. And if you're wondering if there are gaps, I'm going to try to put in lists of like the typical school thing about what they require for science or math or, all those kind of things. It's all going to be in here. So it's a huge project. Yeah. I'm always thinking of new things to do. But anyway, that other commonplace book should be going to press soon. And then we'll have another one to add to these ones. And then one more resource. And these are all available for free download. So you can either order it already done, or you can print out your own thing and combine it, or whatever you want to do to make your own workbook for your kids. And all you got to worry about is the printing and the doing. And that works too. But I try to make these things work so you can really enjoy yourself. Anyway, that is enough. So back to the podcast. I hope you have a wonderful day. Please like and subscribe and click bells and leave reviews and all that kind of stuff. Bye-bye.